Hi Stampers, this is Brenda Keenan with Keenan Kreations, and today we're going to make an elegant Christmas card using copper foil and copper embossing powder. We're going to use the Dashing Deer stamp set with the coordinating framelits and the Timeless Tidings stamp set for the greeting. To get started, we're going to emboss the front of the folded gray granite cardstock, and this is your standard 8.5 by 5.5 and scored down the middle at 4 1/4. We're going to use the standard Big Shot platform designated for the embossing folders. The Swirls and Curls embossing folder is a standard or regular embossing folder, so it's one of the thinner ones. So we are going to have a plate on the bottom and a plate on the top. Now, I actually cut off about 1/4 inch from the bottom of this folder because when I was going through the Big Shot, I felt like it was too close to the sides, and so this just gives me a little more wiggle room, and it's still large enough for the front of the card. So I like to have the cardstock open, and I'm going to line up this edge to this edge of the design. So I'm going to open up the folder, and I'm pressing the cardstock towards the top of the folder. This line right here is just a horizontal guideline. You don't have to have your cardstock right up to it. It just lets you know if you're crooked. Now once you get that design lined up to the edge of the cardstock, you're going to squeeze the folder closed, add a plate on the bottom, and place your embossing folder right there. We're going to have a plate on the top, and again I'm pressing this plate down so that paper is less likely to shift inside that embossing folder. Now I'm sliding this plate in because you want to make sure that your bottom plate and your top plate are past the embossing folder. If one of them is here, you're going to have a part that's not embossed. So I do check to make sure all my edges are in, and then I push it through and turn the handle. Now on this folder, I don't go back a second time because it's already got a lot of that detail. And you can see how pretty that is for the front of our card. Now while I've got the Big Shot out, let's go ahead and place the magnetic platform, a plate on the bottom. I have a piece of the copper foil, and this measures 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. Now this is going to end up being a border for the Designer Series paper. So I'm going to have a nice copper edge all the way around, but I can still use a lot of this copper in the middle for my die cut images. Now I want to place a piece of wax paper over the copper foil. This is going to help the detailed thinlits release more easily. This image is from the Detailed Deer thinlits, and I'm going to place this one right in the middle, a little bit towards the bottom, making sure that I'm leaving enough of an edge for my border for the front of my card. But you can see I still have all this open space here, so let's die cut as many pieces as we can. Now we're going to have a plate on the top, so I'm going to tuck this in and crank that through. And I'm going to go back again, and I'm going to go one more time. I like to look at the back of the paper to make sure that these are cut all the way through, and I can tell the way that this looks that I don't need to run it through another time. So we're just going to lift this up, and you can see how all the framelits easily release because of that wax paper. And I like to use my pokey tool to poke out all these tiny little pieces, but most of it should come out pretty easy. So let's start with the deer. And I am gently pushing. I don't want to tug too hard on these little delicate pieces here. So I'm taking my time. And I'm going to turn this one over. So see, I can use this to help that to start releasing. I'd rather push from the back than from the front. Now this designer series paper is cut just slightly smaller than the 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. So this is actually 3 5/8 by 3 5/8. And this paper comes from the Joyous Noel Specialty Designer Series paper, and one side of the papers has a shiny copper element. And we're just going to add adhesive around all the edges here. Now my deer has a couple of little pieces left in here, so I'm going to spend some time getting those out. I like to use these little tiny dimensionals because I think they fit better. And he's going to be centered but angle just a little bit. Now this goes on the top of the card. I would probably add glue dots in each corner because sometimes these textured edges, the snail adhesive isn't as secure as I would like it to be. So I'm going to, now you know what, I can see that this side is slightly wider than that side, so I'm going to have to do a little manual trimming here. So I'm going to add adhesive around the edges, but reinforce it with glue dots in the corner. So this is going to be closer to the top, but I am going to have it pretty centered from left to right. Gray granite cardstock, and I've already cut it to 4 1/4 by 7/8. Embossing buddy, so just kind of pat that across your cardstock using Versamark ink. And I do want the greeting closer to the right side because I want to make a notch on the left. Copper embossing powder. And I always like to look. Sometimes I have just 1 or 2 flecks of embossing powder, not where I want them. So just clean that up with the end of that pokey tool, or even a toothpick would work. I'm going to set this on a paper plate, and if I hold the heat tool straight up and down, it will not blow off the plate. A triple banner punch, and this will cut a piece of paper as wide as 2 inches. I think the smallest size is 1 inch, 1 1/2, and then 2. Now this is smaller than 1 inch, so I can't have it going against one of the sides. It needs to be manually centered as it's going to place it all the way in, and then I'm going to take my time and get this centered right about there, and then just press that down and you have a little notch. Go ahead and cut the edges of these dimensionals because I want something a little larger than the mini dimensionals. Along the bottom, and I'm lining up the edge of this banner to the right side of the card, but you could center it if you wanted to. Now the inside of the card is your standard 4 inches by 5 1/4, and this is Whisper White cardstock. So let's clean up these corners here. Place a glue dot right in the center of that flower and also where that leaf is. So I'm going to just fold that onto itself so that will fit. And I can see I need to fold that again. So I'm kind of making a glue dot blob right there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and fold this one. And then I'm going to place this right here. If you had liquid glue, that would work too. Just making sure that glue dot's not poking out. And this is going to go right in the corner. And then we're going to repeat for this one. I stamped and embossed the greeting in gold copper, and I die cut it with the stitched square framelit. I'm going to add one of these flowers to the deer. So let's see if I can get one that's going to poke out kind of easy. And we're just going to place that right there. Go ahead and decorate the envelope. We're going to do some embossing on the back and the front. Enjoyed today's project. For more ideas, you can visit me at KeenanCreations.com. Thanks and have a great day.